In the Kingdom of Macedonia, a boy was born, who would go on to become one of the most formidable conquerors in human history. Alexander III of Macedon, later known as Alexander the Great, would lead a campaign that changed the course of civilization. His conquests would span 3 continents, forge one of the largest empires in history, and lay the foundations for the Hellenistic Age, in which Greek culture and influence spread across vast territories. This is the story of how Alexander rose to power, the battles he fought, the people he conquered, and the empire he built. The world before Alexander. To understand Alexander's legacy, we must first look at the world he was born into. The 4th century BC was an era of rivalry and power struggles. The Mediterranean and Near East were home to mighty civilizations. The Greek city-states Athens, Sparta, Thebes, had spent decades fighting each other in the Peloponnesian War, leaving Greece weakened. The Persian Empire, stretching from Egypt to India, was still the superpower of the age, though its strength was fading. The Kingdom of Macedonia, north of Greece, was considered a land of barbarians by the sophisticated city-states to the south. However, one man changed that perception: Philip II of Macedon, Alexander's father. Philip II and the rise of Macedonia. Before Philip II's reign, Macedonia was divided and weak, but when Philip became king in 3059 BC, he transformed it into a military powerhouse. Philip's greatest achievements included reorganizing the Macedonian army, introducing the famous sarissa, a 20-foot-long spear, and the phalanx formation, making his infantry nearly unstoppable, uniting the Greek city-states through diplomacy and war, forming the League of Corinth, with himself as the supreme commander, defeating Athens and Thebes at the Battle of Chaeronea in 3038 BC, securing Macedonian dominance over Greece. Philip then planned to invade the Persian Empire, the longtime enemy of Greece. But before he could launch his campaign, he was assassinated in 3036 BC, under mysterious circumstances. The rise of Alexander. At just 20 years old, Alexander ascended to the throne of Macedonia. Many believed he was too young and inexperienced to rule, but he swiftly proved them wrong. Securing the throne, he executed rivals, including possible claimants to the throne, securing his rule. He crushed rebellions in the north, ensuring Macedonia's stability. He marched into Greece, where some city-states tried to revolt. Thebes resisted, and Alexander responded with brutal force, destroying the city and enslaving its people as an example to others. By 3035 BC, Greece was firmly under Alexander's control. Now he turned his attention to the Persian Empire, his father's ultimate goal, preparing to conquer Persia. Persia was still the most powerful empire in the known world, stretching from the Mediterranean to India. But Alexander saw weaknesses in its leadership. Darius III, the Persian king, had inherited an empire in decline, filled with political instability and weak provincial rulers. Alexander's forces were much smaller than the Persian army, but far superior in discipline and strategy. His army consisted of Macedonian phalanx, armed with sarissas, forming an impenetrable spear wall, elite companion cavalry, Alexander's shock troops fast and deadly, Greek hoplites and mercenaries, battle-hardened soldiers, light skirmishers, archers and Thracian cavalry, providing speed and flexibility. In 3034 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont, modern-day Turkey, entering Persian territory. This marked the beginning of one of the greatest military campaigns in history. The Battle of the Granicus, 3034 BC. Alexander's first test. The Persian satraps, governors of Asia Minor, gathered an army to stop Alexander at the river Granicus. The Persian forces were led by Memnon of Rhodes, a Greek mercenary general who urged the Persians to retreat and burn their own lands to deny Alexander resources. However, the Persian nobles refused. They would stand and fight. The battlefield. The Persians positioned their cavalry on the far side of the river, with Greek mercenary infantry in reserve. Alexander's forces had to cross the river under heavy fire, a risky maneuver. Alexander personally led the companion cavalry, launching a bold charge against the Persian left flank. The battle unfolds. As the Macedonians struggled to cross the river, the The Persians rained arrows and javelins upon them. Alexander charged at full speed, cutting through enemy lines, killing Persian nobles in single combat. The Persian forces collapsed, leaving their Greek mercenaries to fight alone. Alexander ordered no mercy, and thousands of mercenaries were slaughtered or enslaved. The victory secured Alexander's foothold in Asia Minor. He sent Persian armor back to Greece, as a dedication to Athena, signaling that he was the new champion of the Greek world. The path to conquest. With his first victory behind him, Alexander now marched deeper into Persian land. His next targets: Sardis, the Persian regional capital, which surrendered without a fight; Miletus and Halicarnassus, Persian naval strongholds, which Alexander besieged and captured. But Darius III, realizing the scale of the threat, began assembling his main army. He planned to stop Alexander at the Battle of Issus, a battle that would decide the fate of the Persian Empire. The Battle of Issus and the fall of Egypt. Following his decisive victory at the Battle of Granicus, 3034 BC, Alexander continued his relentless march through Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey. He faced little resistance. Most Persian cities surrendered willingly, recognizing that his military strength was unmatched. But King Darius III, the ruler of the Persian Empire, was now preparing for a direct confrontation with Alexander. Darius had assembled an enormous army, vastly outnumbering the Macedonian forces. Confident in his numerical superiority, he personally led his troops into battle, a rare move for a Persian king. Their clash would take place at Issus, one of the most significant battles of antiquity. The Persian response. Darius prepares for war. Darius III realized that Alexander was not a typical invader. His tactical brilliance and fearless leadership had already dismantled Persian control over Asia Minor. But Darius still believed he could crush the Macedonian threat once and for all. He gathered an army estimated at 100,000, 150,000 men. Some sources claim even more. His forces consisted of elite Persian cavalry, Greek mercenaries, Persian infantry and war chariots. He positioned his army in a narrow coastal plain near Issus, expecting an easy victory. Darius's plan was simple: use his overwhelming numbers to surround and crush Alexander's smaller army. Meanwhile, Alexander had continued south, securing cities such as Sardis and Miletus, and besieging the heavily fortified city of Halicarnassus. With his rear secured and supply lines established, he was now ready to march into Syria and Phoenicia, the heart of Persian power in the west. However, Darius unexpectedly moved his army behind Alexander, cutting off his supply lines and forcing him to turn back and fight. This would be Alexander's greatest challenge yet. The Battle of Issus, 30-30-30 Battlefield and army formations. The Persian army had moved into a narrow plain between the Mediterranean Sea and the foothills of the Amanus Mountain. This terrain worked against Darius. His massive army had little room to maneuver, neutralizing its numerical advantage. Alexander's army, about 40,000 men, was deployed as follows: left wing, Greek allied cavalry and Thessalian cavalry under Parmenion, positioned closest to the sea. Center, the Macedonian phalanx, consisting of 18-foot-long sarissas, forming a nearly impenetrable wall of spears. Right wing, Alexander himself led the companion cavalry, the hypaspists, elite foot soldiers and light skirmishers near the mount. Darius's army was arranged with Persian cavalry on the right flank, nearest the sea, Greek mercenary hoplites in the center, his strongest infantry force, Persian infantry and archers on the left flank, closest to the mount. Darius himself positioned at the center, surrounded by his elite royal guard and immortals. Darius believed his superior numbers and cavalry strength would secure victory, but he had underestimated Alexander's speed and tactical ingenuity. The battle begins. Alexander took the initiative, as always. He knew that the Persian cavalry posed the greatest threat. If they could break through Parmenion's left flank, they could encircle the Macedonian. Alexander's feint. Alexander began moving his right wing to the right, toward the mountains. The Persians took the bait, shifting their own troops to counter his movement. This created a gap in the Persian center, a fatal mistake. The Macedonian charge. Alexander suddenly wheeled his forces around and charged straight into the weakened Persian center, heading directly for Darius himself. The companion cavalry smashed through the Persian ranks, cutting down enemy troops. Darius, seeing Alexander coming straight for him, panicked and fled the battlefield in his royal chariot. The Persian collapse. With Darius fleeing, chaos spread among the Persian ranks. The Macedonian phalanx pushed forward, cutting down Persian infantry. Parmenions' left wing, though heavily pressured, held firm. As news of Darius's flight spread, Persian morale collapsed, and their army routed. The battle was over. The road to Egypt. The victory at Issus was decisive. Alexander had shattered the main Persian army and sent Darius running for his life. Key consequences: Persian weakness exposed. The Persian army was not invincible. Alexander had defeated Darius in open battle. Persian royal family captured. Darius's wife, mother, and children were taken prisoner. Alexander treated them with great respect and honor, portraying himself as the true ruler of Persia. Darius's plea for peace. Darius offered a huge ransom, his daughter in marriage and half his empire in exchange for peace. Alexander refused. He wanted all of Persia. Persian naval power neutralized. With Phoenicia and Syria now vulnerable, Alexander turned his attention to the Persian fleet's major naval bases, Tyre and Egypt. Darius retreated into the Persian heartland, hoping to raise another army, but Alexander was now unstoppable. The Siege of Tyre, 3032 BC, breaking Persian naval supremacy. After Issus, Alexander marched south into Phoenicia, a region critical to Persian naval dominance. Many cities surrendered peacefully, except for Tyre, the heavily fortified island city. The siege. Tyre's walls rose 150 feet above the sea, making a direct assault nearly impossible. Alexander, instead of a traditional siege, built a massive causeway from the mainland to the island, using debris from a ruined city. Tyre's navy attacked the causeway, setting it on fire. Alexander responded by building siege towers, battering rams, and war galleys to assault the city by sea. After 7 months of brutal siege warfare, Alexander's forces breached the walls. Tyre was utterly destroyed, and its surviving citizens were either massacred or sold into slavery. With Tyre's fall, the Persian navy was crippled. Alexander now had full control of the eastern Mediterranean. Alexander enters Egypt, 3032 BC. With Persia's naval bases in ruins, Egypt fell without a fight. The Persian satrap surrendered the province, and Alexander was hailed as a liberator. He traveled to Memphis, where he was proclaimed pharaoh. He founded Alexandria, a city that would become a center of Greek learning, culture, and commerce for centuries. He visited the oracle of Siwa in the desert, where he was allegedly declared the son of Amun, the chief Egyptian god. This further solidified his divine status. Alexander was no longer just a conqueror. He was now seen as a god-king, destined to rule the world. The Battle of Gaugamela and the fall of the Persian Empire, 3031 BC. Following his decisive victories at Granicus, 3034 BC, and Issus, 3033 BC, Alexander had crippled Persian power in the west. With Asia Minor, Phoenicia, and Egypt under his control, the eastern heartland of Persia lay open before him. Darius III, desperate to preserve his empire, had retreated deep into Persia to regroup. He was raising another great army, determined to confront Alexander one last time. This battle, fought at Gaugamela in 3031 BC, would decide the fate of the Persian Empire. The march to Mesopotamia. After securing Egypt, Alexander marched northeast through Syria and Mesopotamia, the heart of the Persian Empire. His objective: to destroy Darius's new army and capture the Persian capitals. Alexander's army, 40,000 infantry, 7,000 cavalry, a force hardened by years of battle, highly disciplined and led by experienced commanders. Meanwhile, Darius III had assembled a force far larger than Alexander's. Some ancient sources claim up to 250,000 men. His troops included Persian cavalry from Bactria and India, elite Greek mercenaries, the fearsome Persian royal guard, the immortals, war chariots with scythed blades, a few war elephants, the first Alexander had ever encountered. Darius chose to fight on the vast open plains of Gaugamela, modern-day northern Iraq, a battlefield carefully selected to maximize his numerical advantage. He ordered his men to flatten the terrain to allow his chariots to operate effectively. His plan was simple: encircle Alexander's army, using overwhelming numbers and crush them. Alexander, however, had no intention of fighting a conventional battle. He knew only a masterstroke of tactics could defeat such a massive force. The Battle of Gaugamela, October 1, 3031 BC. The Persian deployment. Darius positioned himself in the center of his army, surrounded by the immortals and his elite Greek mercenaries, war chariots in the front lines, cavalry on both flanks ready to outmaneuver Alexander's army. Alexander's deployment. As always, Alexander placed his trusted commander Parmenion on the left flank, in charge of Greek cavalry, Thessalian cavalry, the Macedonian phalanx forming the central force on the right flank. Alexander himself led the companion cavalry, his elite heavy cavalry unit, Hypaspists, elite foot soldiers trained in shock warfare, Agrian javelin throwers. To counter Darius's numerical advantage, Alexander positioned reserve units behind his main forces, ready to fill any gap. As the battle began, Alexander ordered his right flank to move laterally to the right, away from the main battlefield. This forced Darius to commit more troops to counter Alexander's movement, weakening his center. Darius, fearing an encirclement, ordered his left-wing cavalry to chase after Alexander's forces. This was exactly what Alexander wanted. The Persian formation was now stretched thin, creating gaps in their line. The Persian charge and the Macedonian counter. Seeing Alexander's forces seemingly exposed, Darius unleashed his war chariots. As the scythed chariots charged forward, Alexander's Agrian javelin throwers and archers rained missiles down on them, killing horses and disrupting their charge. The Macedonian phalanx then opened lanes, allowing the surviving chariots to pass harmlessly through before destroying them in close combat. At the same time, Darius ordered his cavalry on the right flank to attack Parmenion's forces. Parmenion was heavily outnumbered and began losing ground, but he fought fiercely to prevent a Persian breakthrough. With the Persian chariots neutralized, Alexander saw the perfect moment to strike. Leading the companion cavalry, he charged directly into the weakened Persian center, heading straight for Darius. The Macedonian phalanx advanced behind him, driving their 18-foot sarissas into the enemy ranks. The shock and precision of the charge shattered the Persian center. Darius, seeing Alexander closing in on him once again, panicked and fled the battlefield, just as he had at Issus. His army, leaderless and demoralized, began to collapse. With Darius gone, the battle devolved into chaos. The Greek phalanx pushed forward, cutting down Persian infantry. Alexander pursued Darius for a short distance, but then turned back when he received an urgent message. Parmenion's left flank was in trouble. Meanwhile, Persian and Indian cavalry had found a gap in the Greek lines, and raided the Macedonian camp, even capturing some of Alexander's baggage. But instead of turning to attack the Macedonian rear, the raiders looted the camp and fled. Parmenion's forces were still struggling against Persian cavalry, but once they heard that Darius had fled, the remaining Persian troops lost heart and retreated. The battle was over. Aftermath. The end of the Persian Empire. The Battle of Gaugamela was Alexander's greatest victory. Casualties: Macedonians, 1,000 dead. Persians, 40,000 dead. Thousands captured, with Darius in retreat, and his army destroyed. Persia was now defenseless. Key consequences: Alexander became the undisputed ruler of the Persian Empire. Darius fled east, but had lost all credibility. Many Persian officials now recognized Alexander as their new king. The road to Babylon, Susa and Persepolis was open. The fall of the Persian capitals, 3030 BC. Alexander marched triumphantly into Babylon, one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. The Persian governors surrendered the city peacefully. Alexander declared himself king of Asia and adopted some Persian customs to gain local support. Shortly after, Susa, another key Persian capital, also surrendered. Finally, Alexander arrived at Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of Persia. He pillaged the city's enormous treasury, distributing wealth to his army. He burned down the royal palace, a symbolic act of revenge for the Persian burning of Athens in 4. The pursuit of Darius and the conquest of Central Asia, 3037 BC. With his decisive victory at Gaugamela in 3031 BC, Alexander shattered the Persian army and forced Darius III to flee eastward. The Persian Empire, once the most powerful in the world,
was now leaderless and in complete disarray. But Alexander was not finished. He was determined to hunt down Darius and eliminate all opposition to his rule. As he pursued his final conquest of Persia, he also turned his attention to Central Asia, a vast and treacherous region, where local rulers resisted Macedonian control. This phase of Alexander's campaign would prove to be one of the most grueling, involving harsh deserts, mountain warfare and treacherous betrayal. The flight of Darius. After fleeing Gaugamela, Darius reached Ekbatana, the Persian capital of Media, where he attempted to gather support from local satraps. However, most Persian nobles had lost faith in their king, and were unwilling to risk further conflict. As Alexander advanced rapidly towards Ekbatana, Darius and his remaining forces abandoned the city, retreating further east into Bactria, modern Afghanistan. By mid-3030 BC, Alexander had reached Ekbatana. The Persian treasury there was seized, and Alexander distributed a fortune to his men, solidifying their loyalty. He left Parmenion in charge of the region, while he continued the chase for Darius. However, before Alexander could capture him, Darius was betrayed. The assassination of Darius III. As Darius fled towards Bactria, his most powerful satrap, Bessus, the governor of Bactria, began to plot against him. Bessus and other Persian nobles saw Darius as weak and no longer fit to rule. They seized him, put him in a royal cart, and continued their escape, hoping to use him as a political puppet. Meanwhile, Alexander pursued relentlessly, covering enormous distances in record time. As Alexander's forces closed in, Bessus and his allies stabbed Darius and left him dying by the roadside, before fleeing deeper into Bactria. When Alexander arrived, he found Darius's body still in the cart, covered in blood and abandoned. The last king of Persia had died a prisoner of his own men. Alexander was deeply affected by the sight. He covered Darius's body with his own royal cloak. He ordered a proper royal burial at Persepolis. Alongside the other Persian kings, he declared himself the rightful ruler of Persia. With Darius dead, the Persian Empire ceased to exist. But Bessus now proclaimed himself king of kings, and Alexander vowed to bring him to justice. The war in Bactria and Sogdia, 3029–3037 BC. With Persia fully conquered, Alexander now turned his focus to Bactria and Sogdia, the far eastern provinces of the former Persian Empire. Unlike previous campaigns, this was not a war of great battles, but instead a brutal guerrilla war against local tribal chieftains and warlords. The rugged mountains, deserts and river valleys made the region extremely difficult to control. The local people, fierce horse-riding nomads, were experts at ambush tactics, striking quickly before disappearing into the terrain. The capture of Bessus. Bessus had fled to Sogdia, hoping to rally support among the region's warlike tribes. But when Alexander pushed deep into the region, Bessus' own men turned against him. He was captured, bound in chains and handed over to Alexander. Alexander had him publicly humiliated, whipping him in front of his troops. As punishment for murdering Darius, he was executed in a Persian-style trial, either crucified or torn apart. With Bessus dead, Alexander had avenged Darius and removed the last Persian rival to his rule. But Bactria and Sogdia were far from pacified. The brutal Sogdian resistance. Even with Bessus gone, the local tribes continued to resist fiercely. The Sogdians and Bactrians launched surprise attacks on Alexander's supply lines. They destroyed garrisons and ambushed Greek soldiers in the rugged terrain. Alexander's army, accustomed to open field battles, was now forced into mountain warfare and relentless counter-insurgency operations. Alexander responded ruthlessly. Any city or village that resisted was destroyed. Thousands were massacred or enslaved. He founded new Greek cities, like Alexandria Skete, Alexandria the furthest to control the region. Despite these efforts, the resistance persisted, led by Spitamenes, a brilliant Sogdian warlord. The war against Spitamenes, 3028 BC. Spitamenes was an exceptional strategist, skilled in hit-and-run tactics. He wiped out a Macedonian force at Marakanda, modern Samarkand. He harassed Alexander's forces for over a year, preventing them from fully controlling Sogdia. Alexander's frustration grew. He personally led his army in relentless winter campaigns, burning villages and slaughtering entire populations. Eventually, Spitamenes' allies turned on him and killed him. fearing Alexander's wrath. His severed head was sent to Alexander, marking the end of organized resistance in Central Asia. With Sogdia finally under Macedonian control, Alexander turned his attention south to India. But before continuing his conquests, he made a surprising move: the marriage of Roxana, 3027 BC. During his time in Bactria, Alexander met Roxana, the daughter of a powerful Bactrian noble. She was described as one of the most beautiful women in Asia, and Alexander fell deeply in love with her. He married Roxana in a grand ceremony, integrating Persian and Macedonian traditions. The marriage secured loyalty from local Bactrian nobles, reducing the risk of further revolts. However, many of Alexander's Macedonian officers resented his growing embrace of Persian custom. His adoption of Persian dress, demand for proskynesis, bowing before him, and growing paranoia created tensions within his own ranks, leading to dramatic consequences. The execution of Clitus, 3028 BC. One night, at a royal banquet, Alexander and his officers were drinking heavily. Clitus the Black, one of Alexander's oldest and most loyal generals, began mocking him. He criticized Alexander's adoption of Persian customs. He reminded Alexander that he owed his victories to his Macedonian soldiers, not the Persian. Drunk and furious, Alexander grabbed a spear and killed Clitus on the spot. He immediately regretted his actions, and locked himself in his tent for days in mourning. But the damage was done. His men no longer saw him as the same leader they had followed from Greece. With tensions rising, Alexander pressed forward, his next destination the rich and mysterious lands of India. The road to India. By 3027 BC, Alexander had crushed all resistance in Central Asia. Persia was his. Bactria and Sogdia were pacified. Roxana was now his queen. But his desire for conquest had not faded. The return from India and the final years, 3025, 3023 BC. After years of relentless conquest, Alexander the Great's campaign in India reached its climax in 3026 BC, with the Battle of the Hydaspes. Though victorious, his army, weary from years of hardship, refused to march further into the Indian subcontinent. Facing a rare insubordination, Alexander was forced to turn back. His return journey would be marked by some of the most grueling and fateful events of his life. The grueling return journey, Alexander split his forces into three groups. One contingent under the command of Craterus was to return via a safer route through Arakosha, modern southern Afghanistan. Another, led by Admiral Granicus, was tasked with exploring and navigating the Persian Gulf by sea. Alexander himself led the majority of his troops on a harrowing march through the Gedrosian Desert, present-day southern Iran and Pakistan. The march through Gedrosia proved catastrophic. Harsh terrain, extreme heat, and a lack of supplies led to mass casualties. Many soldiers died of thirst, exhaustion, and starvation. Alexander himself shared in the suffering, reportedly refusing water when it was scarce. Though he eventually emerged from the ordeal, the price was high. His once mighty army had been severely weakened. The return to Persia. In 3024 BC, Alexander reached the Persian heartland and set about consolidating his empire. He sought to integrate Persian and Macedonian cultures through policies such as the mass marriage at Susa, where he arranged the marriages of Macedonian officers to Persian noblewomen. He also attempted to train Persian soldiers in the Macedonian style of warfare, an unpopular decision among his veterans. Discontent grew, and Alexander was forced to make concessions, such as disbanding some of his Persian troops and reaffirming Macedonian dominance. The death of Hephaestion and growing paranoia. One of the greatest personal blows to Alexander came with the sudden death of Hephaestion, his closest friend and general in Consumed by grief, Alexander ordered extravagant funeral rites and executed the physician who had failed to save Hephaestion. His behavior grew increasingly erratic. Some accounts suggest paranoia took hold, leading him to execute trusted officers under suspicion of treachery. The final year in Babylon. By early 3023 BC, Alexander had returned to Babylon, the heart of his empire. He had grand plans, a campaign to conquer Arabia, further consolidation of his vast territories, and the establishment of a new administrative system. However, these ambitions would never come to fruition. In June 3023 BC, at the age of 32, Alexander fell gravely ill after a prolonged banquet and drinking session. Over the course of several days his condition worsened. Whether his death was due to fever, poison, or a lingering illness remains debated. On June 10 or 11, 3023 BC, Alexander the Great died, reportedly leaving his empire to the strong. His death plunged the empire into chaos, leading to the Wars of the Successors, where his generals fought for control over the vast territories he had conquered. Alexander's final years were a mix of triumph and tragedy. Though he remained undefeated in battle, his empire, held together by sheer force of will, was already beginning to fracture. His legacy, however, endured. His conquests reshaped the ancient world, influencing cultures, trade, and governance for centuries to come. Even in death, Alexander the Great remained a figure of legend, a symbol of unparalleled ambition and military genius.